for people who are not aware, you pitched for Team Israel in the 2020 Olympic Games. Can you tell that story of how you got to Tokyo and how you linked up with Team Israel baseball?
Yeah, so it was 2018. It was my first full season of independent ball, and I didn't really know much about the international baseball scene. I always thought it would be something cool to be involved in, but the goal of playing indie ball is more so to try to get signed and play affiliate ball. So kind of learned more about the Latin American winter leagues while I was playing. And one day, the manager that I had at the time in Normal, Illinois, in the Frontier League, he asked me if I was interested in playing winter ball anywhere. And I said, actually, I would love to play for Team Israel, not knowing that this was still a thing. I don't know if you remember this. I don't think you stayed with us at McGuigan's house, and I kind of watched a little bit on my own our 6th year. But when we were playing at Texas, I watched a bunch of the Israel World Baseball Classic games, and then again when we were back in Richmond. So I knew that there was a team, but I didn't know that there was any upcoming events, or didn't really know how the whole European scene worked. So anyway, our manager at the time was friends with Gabe Kapler, who was previously involved in Team Israel. And he called me the next day and said to expect a call from someone involved with Team Israel. On the flip side, at the same time, Nate Mulberg, from one of our coaches at Richmond our last year, knew the manager of Team Israel, and he told him about me and told him that I was Jewish. Our manager's from the same county in New York that I'm from, and he knew who I was but didn't know I was Jewish because of my last name. So this kind of all happened at the same time. But from my perspective, then that next day, I actually got a call from our manager. And he was basically like, Jonathan, you might not know who I am, but I know who you are. I had no idea you were Jewish because of your Italian-sounding last name. If you're healthy and willing to put in what it takes to become an Israeli citizen, we'd love to have you on the team. And I said, absolutely. This is something I would love to be involved in. I literally started making Aliyah and all the paperwork necessary to become a citizen the next day. And that was kind of a continuous process over the next few months of that season. And then I think it was maybe a week or so after that season ended, myself and 9 other guys went on a trip to Israel to finalize our citizenship and officially make Aliyah. So I was on that first group of 10 American-born guys who became Israeli citizens.
To stop you for a sec. So the coach of Team Israel, the one that reached out to you, he was kind of following your baseball career. He was obviously aware of how you were performing, but he just didn't know that you were Jewish. He didn't know that you were eligible to play for Team Israel. And then he reached out to you?
Yeah, that's correct. Somehow, it went from the manager I had at the time through Gabe Kapler, then to Peter Kurz, who was our general manager. And then once they found out, I guess I was someone from Westchester County, where our manager, Eric Holtz, was also from, they made that connection, and he called me literally the next day. So the process started pretty quickly, and then there was no turning back. And a bunch of guys from that first trip that I was on did, in fact, play on the Olympic team. So that's kind of how it started. And then we never played in any qualifying events together so I got citizenship in September of 18. The first qualifying event was in July of 2019.
So the Gabe Kapler connection, I feel like that's worth getting into because he might be a robot, and he's one of the largest, most ripped human beings I've ever seen play a sport. And how was Gabe Kapler involved in this again? What was his connection to Team Israel? Because he's an absolute specimen, and we like to bring up specimens on this podcast.
Yes, you're exactly right. That's one thing we both have loved to talk about is our bodies have fluctuated through injury and various types of fitness. Where I see you swinging mace clubs around and doing crazy movement stuff in your bedroom.
100%.
Anyway.
I'm gonna take an intermission during the podcast. I'm gonna swing a mace. I'm gonna do some 360s for about 15 minutes, and that gets the blood flowing for the second half.
Oh my God. I really don't fully know his involvement. I forget if he managed or was an assistant coach on one of the qualifying teams for the World Baseball Classic years before. But I know once he got into a managerial position, he kind of had to step away from that. I think he was with the Phillies at the time, and this was before he became the manager of the Giants. But I know he was on the coaching staff and probably helped put together the roster for the previous qualifiers, because there was 2 times before for World Baseball Classics where Israel was in the qualifiers and almost made it to the Classic, but unfortunately did not. I don't think he was actually in the dugout for the 2017 team or anything like that, but he might have been involved in the qualifiers in 16 for that, and then previous events. But ever since my involvement, he was not a part of it.
So how does because this was a little bit confusing to me. So how does the whole citizenship process or because I was confused when I first heard you tell me about Team Israel, and you're obviously Jewish, but you're not actually an Israeli citizen, or you weren't at the time. What is special about Israel, and what allowed you to actually play for Israel being Jewish but not actually being a citizen? Because when I'm in my head, when I'm thinking, someone's gonna, play soccer for Nigeria, they have to have some sort of affiliation with Nigeria. They can't just be a religion from the country. So how did that all happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because not all Israelis are Jewish, and I never really understood that concept until I went there and had it explained to me. But like with the law of return in Israel, I think it's if you have at least one Jewish grandparent and can prove that, then you have the ability to go back to Israel and make your and get your citizenship. And a big part of, being Jewish is returning like to the homeland, like exploring your identity, like where religion began in Jerusalem. I think that's why Americans are also able to do birthright trips. But so long as you have that one Jewish grandparent, you are able to get your citizenship. You are also supposed to live there for 6 months when doing this. So that was the only real catch. We did not have to do that because most of us were playing professional baseball at the time. So there was no way that would have worked. They're just the athletic facilities and fields and all that are not enough yet to be able to house guys like that in the off season. So we did not have to live there for the 6 months. I know one of the guys on my trip actually did live there for 6 months. And then if you fall into that age, I think that 19 to 21 age range, you're supposed to also serve in the IDF, which obviously we did not have to do. We were all past the age of 21. I know one of the things I had to do was get a letter from my rabbi basically saying that I think it was like my family belonged to this temple for my whole life. Show that I was bar mitzvahed when I was 13. So it was actually a pretty straightforward process for me. It was just like, there's a lot of time spent on the phone with people in Israel, like finalizing the paperwork and just proving our Jewish identity. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much how the process worked. So I would assume that even, I know you have a Jewish parent, I think it would, if you wanted to, it would be something that you could do as well.
So say I started taking steroids tonight, which is not out of the possibility. I'm sure in New York you can get your hands on anything. So let's say I did a sketchy steroid deal tonight, and 6 months from now I was throwing 103 miles per hour from the left side, just absolutely nasty slider, just sitting 101, topping out 103 miles per hour. And I approached Team Israel and I said, hey, if you pay for me to live in Israel for 6 months, if you pay for me to go party in Tel Aviv, I'll keep my end of the bargain. I'll keep injecting steroids. I'll keep throwing, once a week because, I'm so juiced up. I don't need to actually have that big of a routine. Would that be a situation where I could then follow through and play for Team Israel and join you in 2024?
Would the juice be out of your system by the time we go and play in the next event?
Yeah, I would probably, I'd either do that or I'd disguise it, maybe in like real juice boxes. Like I would mix it into a juice box, and I would take it there so no one would suspect it. Actually, it's a funny thing. So I don't know if you've been following the whole boxing thing with Jake Paul. Have you been looking into that at all? Like the YouTuber Jake Paul?
No, I know who he is, but I have not been following.
So he's started a boxing career, legitimate boxing career. He knocked out Ben Askren. He just beat another guy, Tyron Woodley, who's a tested fighter. He can, throw his hands. He's a respected fighter, or was a respected fighter in the UFC, and he just beat Tyron Woodley. And he's this YouTube sensation that has now transformed himself into a boxer. And he did an interview where someone asked him about PEDs, or there was alleged PED use, and Jake Paul's response was like, "Look at me, how could I be on PEDs? I'm literally about to go for a run and eat an ice cream cone." That was his response. He's like, "Yo, I'm eating ice cream right now. Like, how could I be injecting testosterone or Winstrol into my butt cheek when I'm literally just like eating this ice cream cone?" So it obviously worked for Jake Paul. So I probably wouldn't stop, but I would just walk around wherever the next Olympics is, just licking an ice cream cone and trying to throw people off, because according to Jake Paul, there's no way that the two can be in your system at the same time.
Wow. I've never thought of it that way. Well, I mean, I can tell you that I have never taken anything like that, and I consume ice cream.
You've never eaten ice cream?
No, that's not. I was going to say I consume ice cream on a daily basis, but there has never been any PED uses. So I like that, though. I mean, with the success that it sounds like he's had, maybe this needs to become more of a staple.
Yeah, no, I'm just good because you're still you have your whole career in front of you. I'll just act as like an experiment for you. If you're thinking about taking anything, like, you can just give it to me, and I'll just be the lab experiment you keep in your house, and you can just like feed me and clothe me, and that'll be my job. I'm cool with that.
I'm down. I will take you up. I will take you on for that.
So after you linked up with Team Israel and you got past the citizenship, you met the coach, you kind of had an idea of what the whole Olympic situation would be like. Then what was the situation? Because you were playing baseball at the time, you were getting ready for the Olympics. I know you went on a qualifying tear through Europe. What then led up to first thinking that you're going to play in 2020, of course, and then the Olympics got moved to 2021. But before that even came into your mind, where the 2020 Olympics could possibly not happen and ended up not happening, what was your process or Team Israel's routine, like shit what were you doing? How were you getting ready for it? Things like that.
Yeah, so got to think back. We qualified at the end of 2019. Early in 2020, the team went on a trip to Israel to do like a bunch of media stuff, kind of show their faces around the city. A lot of stuff in uniform around the city. I know there were pictures of like the guys in Tel Aviv in their uniform, like doing photo shoots, talking to people on the streets. I actually was not on that trip because I was playing ball in Australia at the time. So I went on a trip by myself after that to kind of do some of the stuff that they did and some of like the medical clearance that we had to do. And then we were supposed to have a training camp again, and like same thing as what happened this year, but I guess in July of 2020 for a few weeks building up to the Olympics. So that's pretty much all that would have happened, because everyone, if you were playing minor league baseball or independent ball or whatever it is, you would have been playing your season. Either your team would allow you to come to camp and be a part of the team for a few weeks before the Olympics, or you would meet the team a day or two before camp ended and fly to Tokyo with the team. So that's what the whole build up to the Olympics would have been. I mean, guys in our team are from all over the place, and you have people who are retired and came out of retirement. You have guys that were presently playing, and then we had a few college guys on our team. So people were all over. So to really bring this group together is difficult. We're also lucky that like a lot of the guys are from the Northeast, Southeast, or West Coast. So a lot of guys know each other, have crossed paths. We've all become really tight, tight group of friends. So I've overlapped with so many guys training at different times. You know, a random day that I'm home, I'll go to our manager's facility and see guys from the team or guys that are closer to the New York City area. So that's pretty much it officially that would have happened for the team. And then in 2021, this year, it was pretty much the same timeline of training camp leading up to the Olympics. And we had guys that were playing minor league ball that were arriving, you know, 5 days before we left, 2 or 3 days before we left. One of my friends, we actually, when we were checking into the village in Tokyo, we met up with him there because he was taking a flight from playing on the West Coast and met up with us in Tokyo. So we kind of came from all over the place, but that was really the grouping of guys that came together.
So what was it like traveling with Team Israel? Were you sketched out at all because of the past attacks on Jewish athletes? Were guys just, you know, did they hand out machine guns the first day and be like, it's up to you, you know, protect yourself? Like what was the vibe like when you were traveling? And were there any moments where you were like, oh fuck, this is an actual threat and they're taking this really seriously?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there were definitely no weapons in the village, even with all the Israeli security that was there. Yeah. I never felt unsafe. Never one time did I feel unsafe. We were not allowed to travel with anything with like Olympic rings on it or like a Star of David, nothing really representing Israel. We couldn't wear anything like that whenever we would travel. And I wear that stuff when I train and, you know, when I'm with Team Israel, but that's about it. Just don't want to bring too much attention to it. But no, I never felt unsafe from the traveling standpoint. I feel like even throughout COVID and everything, like it's almost like, yeah, getting on an airplane is obviously risky, but there's a lot worse things that you can do to get yourself sick or in this situation, draw attention to yourself. I will say where I felt it was in training camp. We had security, but like every stadium we played at was like a different setup. So anybody could kind of like infiltrate the security and set up in a different way if they really wanted to. And I remember when we played our first game together in Brooklyn, I'm sure you've been to the Cyclones Park.
Yeah.
So not the Coney Island side, but behind home plate, there's like a bunch of high-rise buildings around. And when we were shagging BP in the outfield, we were talking to some guys about it, or guys on our team were like, you know, anybody that hates Israel or hates Jewish people could easily be camped out in one of these buildings that's overlooking the field. And I remember that thought re-entered my mind during the anthem that day, and like my heart was racing. And that was really the only time that I felt it. There was a few protests outside of the stadium of our games during camp, but they were nonviolent, and I mean there was a handful of people there protesting. It wasn't anything crazy, and we had far more security than there was people outside protesting. So I felt really safe the whole time playing for this team.
So was the security strapped up? Like, did they have guns on them, or was it more just like they were there as a presence to deter people?
No, they were. I mean, there was like Secret Service type security there. There was Major League Baseball security there, and those people did not have weapons or anything. But there was so much police. There was a lot of people protecting us. I mean, there were guys in vests and had automatic rifles outside the stadium, inside the stadium, that were there to protect us at all of these games. It was all different levels of security. And I mean, there was security beyond the security that we saw that was there. And the Israeli security guys are very, very secretive as well. So, I mean, we were well protected at all times. In the village, nobody was armed. There was no weapons or anything. Even the Japanese security, maybe they had batons, but I think that was it.
Yeah. I told you I just got back from Colombia, and I'll probably talk a little bit about more about the experience on the podcast whenever it comes up. But you talking about the Israeli security made me think of traveling through Colombia, which I felt very safe the entire time. You definitely have to be smart and be careful. And Colombia also has that whole narcos reputation and kind of romanticized, dangerous cocaine, like don't go here. It's just basically guns in the street in America. And I felt very safe, but it was a weird feeling having guys on a lot of the corners that were policemen with bulletproof vests and machine guns. It made me feel like I was okay, but then also in the back of my mind, I would think, why, like, what is the reason that they're here? Like, what happened 2 years ago or 10 years ago in this spot where now they have guys with machine guns that are walking around? Or, I'd be sitting down for dinner and sizing up some of the security guards where I'm like, is that guy about to take a bullet for me while I'm sitting here taking a tequila shot or eating seafood, mariscos, whatever? I'd be like, yeah, that guy, he looks a little bit soft. He needs to go back and do some more training. And then I would see like a huge guy with a machine gun, like absolutely ripped. And I'd feel like this guy, if anything went down, he would just annihilate everyone in 2 seconds.
Yeah. It definitely brings, it brings different thoughts to your mind. I think at the end of the day, you just have to realize that anything can happen anywhere. I mean, the fact that in the Munich Olympics, people were able to infiltrate the village so easily and take those Israeli athletes hostage, although it was so many years ago, is still a terrifying concept, and just a reminder that anything can happen anytime. Doesn't matter what the event is or where you are. And I definitely was nervous the first time I went to Israel and saw 19-year-old boys and girls walking around with automatic rifles who looked like they could be 14. Yeah. That was pretty scary to see for the first time. But then you kind of get you got to realize that these people that live in Israel experience this and see this on a daily basis. Same thing with you being in Colombia. And I mean, we had security with us everywhere that we went, everywhere we played, everywhere we practiced. So you kind of just, it's always a little bit like nerve-wracking and makes you think twice the first day. But it's protection that, like, thank God we're able to have. And just so long as you carry yourself the right way and don't draw unnecessary attention to yourself, like you're going to be safe. So I never really felt anything at any time, especially when I was in the village. I would say actually walking around the village, there was like 1 or 2 times where I was walking by myself and you're just kind of thinking about anything. And there was this area between like the cafeteria and the gym where like the gates would open up, and there was so much security there, like facial recognition, scanning our credentials, different stuff like that before you could even get in the village, and like scanning your bags through. But like I said, there's this area where a gate opened up and trucks would come in and drop, I'm assuming, waters, food, other goods and stuff that were needed in the village every day. And in my head, I was like, if anyone wanted to sprint through the gate at this time, like nobody has weapons or real protection here to stop someone. So something could happen. So there was like 1 or 2 times where the gates open and there was a delivery being made, and I would kind of like scurry past and get my way to the gym to get out of that area. But I think that was just thoughts that you kind of put in your own head. But I mean, they're very real. Anything could happen.
Yeah, I was reading about an explosion that happened in the Afghanistan evacuations that have been going on the past few weeks. And, it's all over the news, and United States pulling out. And there was an explosion at the airport that killed a bunch of soldiers. I think it might have killed other civilians as well. And I heard one of the generals talking about it, and he said that basically you have to have checkpoints to check people in to the restricted area. And that many times is the most dangerous place to be, because you need to have a place where you check people. And so if someone comes up with a suicide vest with like a bomb strapped to their chest, like this guy did in Afghanistan, you have to stop him at some point, or else he can just walk right into the airport and he probably would have killed even more people. But those soldiers that are clearing cars at checkpoints that, could have shit in the trunk, or someone walks up with something under their clothes or whatever, that's an extremely scary situation. And I have a lot of respect for the people that are putting themselves at those type of checkpoints, no matter what organization they're a part of, where they're trying to clear people that have weapons, or there's a higher risk than other areas of the world.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be thankful for people that are willing to put themselves at risk like that every single day, especially when you're, like you said, in a situation like that where you're probably more at a higher risk for attack. And, you know, maybe in Japan, it was a similar kind of feeling for those guards, knowing that this was the first time there was an Israeli team there again in so many years, and especially with so many eyes on this year's Olympics, given the fact that it was delayed a whole year. And, you know, just life is not going on the same way. I know it was something that a lot of people were tuning into and aware of that were happening. So with that higher level of awareness, there's a higher chance of something happening. So, yeah, I mean, we got to be thankful for all the people that are there that put their life on the line to protect us.